Welcome to In the Spotlight. I'm Eric Townell. My guest today is Ralph Meranto. He's the artistic director of JCC's CenterStage, which is housed at the Lewis S. Wolk Center here in Rochester, New York, the Jewish Community Center. Welcome, Ralph. Thank you so much for coming in.
Glad to have.
Great to have you here.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful to have a theater at a complex like the Wolk Center.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a long history of theaters in JCCs and in Jewish community centers across the country. But we are very fortunate that when the JCC building was built a little over 40 years ago, they put in a beautiful proscenium theater. Holds 288 seats, special fly system and lighting system. It's really a fabulous space.
Really represents a commitment to the art form.
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot of funding that went into it to make sure that there was a real world-class theater right there at the JCC. And I've been thrilled for the last 12 years to be the guy who's been making it happen.
Fantastic. Now, so it really gives you a lot of license in what you can bring in, and so it's not typical Jewish-related theater.
Well, yeah, so obviously we are in a JCC, so obviously when there is interesting, important new works coming out that have Jewish themes to them, obviously we're the ones going, let's do that play. You know, we were not just the first theater in the area, but the first theater in the country to do a play called Bad Jews that was a big success in New York. You know, when those kind of interesting plays come out that have Jewish themes, we are absolutely at the forefront of doing them. However, we do a season of 5 shows per year, plus a summer program, plus a 4-show children's theater company. So obviously not every single show we do is going to be directly connected to a particular Jewish story or Jewish character or Jewish writer.
Right.
But we try to make a mixture of those things so that the audiences come in are as vast and varied as the stories that we tell.
That's great. And if audiences want to find out more about the Jewish Community Center and the theater, CenterStage Theater, while we're talking, how do they find you on the web?
At jcccenterstage.org. Nice and simple, jcccenterstage.org.
Oh, that's terrific. So I hope they follow along at home. And, you know, I was interested to see that it's a full year activity that you're offering there.
Oh, absolutely. We have a performance, a technical rehearsal, I would say 44 weeks out of the year usually. There is some sort of production, either the Children's Theater Company Tykes or the CenterStage, which is our adult professional theater program, special events, music events, Jewish Film Festival, Jewish Book Festival. There is just constant activity going on at the Hart Theater at the JCC.
And now tell me about Tykes. That's an interesting name.
Yeah, so Tykes stands for Theater Young Kids Enjoy. Founded by Freda Schneider, who is the artistic director. They do a season of 4 shows at the JCC, which are adult professional actors performing shows for children. And so they work, you know, overlapping with CenterStage, which is the adult professional theater company at the JCC.
See. So is it teaching kids about drama, or is it performing for?
No, it's performing for kids. So their focus is largely on children's literature, bedtime stories, classic tales told through stage, getting young people to start coming to the theater at a very early age and appreciating what happens with live theater.
Building their taste for that for life.
Absolutely,
That's
absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And you mentioned professional actors. Are these equity actors or?
Yeah, so CenterStage is what I call a hybrid of a local professional theater company. So we use local directors, local designers, local actors, but we do pay them a professional level pay for the time that they are working at our theater. And this is a hybrid that really never existed in Rochester until the last few years, when local theaters started being able to pay local people a little bit more. You see it in bigger cities like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Cleveland, but you see it in cities like Buffalo as well, where local people are able to work, use their craft that they have spent their lifetime developing, and bring high-quality professional theater to the local community. Now, we have Jiva Theater Center, of course, our lead equity theater in town, which is a union theater, brings in most of their performers from New York. And then we have theaters like the JCC, which are able to employ local professional actors and bring a high-quality level as well.
That's terrific. And now, does the creative team come from here as well, the writers and directors?
Yeah, I mean, most of the time. I mean, obviously we bring in outside artists sometimes. You know, the Calamari Sisters are a very popular show that we've had many different performances performances of different productions of theirs at the JCC, but they're New York based. But they started here. You know, their very first production was here in Rochester, and they have a huge following here. Last year we brought in an amazing performer named Brad Zimmerman with his show My Son the Waiter, A Jewish Tragedy. And again, that was a show that had played off Broadway for over a year and a half, and then the moment he took it on the road, we booked him here. But the majority of what we do is local theater, professional theater on a local level, where we select the works that are the hot new works coming out of New York, the hot new works on the regional theater circuit, or in many cases, works that we develop ourselves.
That's fantastic. And you direct productions as well as organize this?
Yeah, so I'm the artistic director, the producer, the chief fundraiser, you know, empty the trash, whatever it is that you need to do. But I also direct usually 3 of the productions throughout the year. Sometimes I do some of the plays, at least 1 big musical every year. Usually our summer program, which is a youth theater program, where instead of using local adults, we bring in a team of high school and college kids and present a full-scale professional level musical using only high school and college kids, most of whom are on professional tracks, wanting to go to college and pursue this as a career. So I usually direct that show. It's one of my favorite times per year.
Oh, that's terrific. So, you know, it's neat that there is straight theater, so to speak, and musical theater as well in a typical season. Right.
So our 41st season, which we're in the middle of right now, is kicking off with the Calamari Sisters, and we'll have the first local production of a hysterical musical comedy called First Date, the first local production of a beautiful musical, The Bridges of Madison County, the musical, the first area production of Buyer and Seller, C-E-L-L-A-R, which is a hysterically funny show about a young man who is hired to manage the shopping mall in the basement of Barbra Streisand's house. We'll have our original music series, The Hitmakers, which we created, where each year we tell a story about pop music and the stories behind the music that was developed, and then sing 25 to 30 songs of the era, often focusing on pop music of the 1960s, 1970s, and bringing those songs that everybody knows to audiences, but in a new way, and telling the stories behind them.
And that's an annual event?
That's an annual event, usually every February, and we started that many years ago with an American Songbook series where we celebrated Jewish composers. Over time, that morphed into something we call the Hit Factory, which sang the songs of the Brill Building in New York and pop music of the 1960s. And then that's morphed into the Hit Makers, which the last couple of years we've been doing the music of the 1960s.
Oh, that's terrific. So people will find some comedy and some topical and some recognizable names. And,
definitely.
Books might have read. And
our mission is to entertain. That is what theater should be able to do. But we do have a very strong focus on presenting socially conscious theater, on things that educate the community about something, but at the same time always want to entertain them at the same time.
I see.
So, you know, a play like the Triangle Factory Fire Project that we did a number of years ago. Very powerful story that tells the story of what was the biggest change in America for worker safety laws, the creation of unions to protect workers in factories. Because of this event that happened over 100 years ago, we have worker safety laws in America that protect our workers. The Triangle Factory Fire Project tells the story of what happened in New York at the Triangle Waste Factory that made that happen. A few years ago we did an amazing musical that I found in Canada called My Mother's Lesbian Jewish Wiccan Wedding. Hysterically funny, but also, you know, this was presented here in Rochester at a time when gay marriage was not yet legal in New York State. And gay marriage was legal in Canada at that time, and this gentleman wrote this show about his mother coming out as a lesbian, marrying a woman who was a Wiccan, and they had a lesbian Jewish Wiccan wedding. And at that point, I saw the show in Canada, and I said, you know, America needs to see this. This is a real, true story about love. And there's a beautiful song in it called Legalize Love. And when I heard that, I said, you know, we need to bring this to America. And so we were the first theater in America to license that show and help them develop the American version of it, which has since played to a dozen regional theaters across the country, played at a big festival in New York. And those writers, David and Irene, who created that piece, are the writers of Come From Away, which was just on Broadway and nominated for a Tony Award, which is the musical about what happened on 9/11 when the planes were diverted to Canada. And so these were young writers who were creating their first musical when we brought them in to do Lesbian Wedding, and now they're on Broadway.
Another indication that not all the great art starts in Manhattan, but it can be developed in Rochester.
Absolutely.
Yeah, people can find it here.
We last season, during our 40th anniversary season, created a new play called Church and State. It's a comedy about what happens when a conservative Christian Republican senator all of a sudden questions his stance on the role of God in politics and gun control. But it's a comedy. And it was developed with a writer in New York. We created the piece here as part of our membership in the National New Play Network. We put it out into the world, and some other regional theaters got on board with us and did the play as well. And then after its development process in those theaters, opened off-Broadway at New World Stages, where it ran for 3 months. Got a nomination for Best New Play by the Off-Broadway Alliance, and is now being pushed out into the regional theater market. And we just recently had our first regional theater sign on board to do that. And when those theaters across the country are doing it, it's going to say in the tiniest print at the bottom of the page, developed in conjunction with Ralph Meranto CenterStage Theater, Rochester, New York. And this is part of our mission to not only bring a world of theater to Rochester, but also take Rochester theater and send it out into the world.
That's terrific. People should be very proud to have the company in town here.
Absolutely, and it's a joy for us to do, and it's an honor for us to be able to help create the new theater that is going out into the world.
And fortunately, you have the facility there that gives you the scope to do that.
Absolutely, we have a tremendously supportive JCC that stands behind us and understands the importance of arts and culture in our community and supports what we do. We have an incredible group of subscribers that come and trust that these plays, often which they have never heard the titles, but they know that we are going to bring them a high quality production. They're going to say, well, if Ralph picked it, let's go see it.
Right.
And that when we bring new works, that they trust that. We've had a number of world premiere plays that we have presented on our stage, and people are saying, well, if they picked it, it must be good. Let's come and support it. Let's see what happens. Our donors put their money behind it because, you know, developing new works is expensive.
Yeah.
You know, we cannot survive on ticket sales alone. We need our patrons to pledge their financial support, sponsors, corporations to organize groups to come and see the shows. Those are what are giving us the foundation we need to be able to put the effort into creating new works, bringing the highest quality that we can. I mean, we did a musical recently, the musical Titanic, our most expensive production in history. You've got to sink a boat.
Right, yeah.
You know? What are you going to do? Right? And so very expensive to put all those costumes together, the set together, to be able to tell that story. But you got to do it well. And so we sold out nearly every single ticket to nearly every single performance. And still would not have been able to pay our bills if we didn't have sponsors and donors who were there to make sure that we are able to give everybody the best that we can give.
And where are your audiences coming from? Are they basically local or regional? Where do you find
I mean, people do travel to see the shows at the JCC, but mostly it is for the Rochester market, for the 5-county region, people who want to see high-quality theater at a very reasonable price, that want interesting new works that challenge them. You know, not everybody can afford to go to New York and see the hottest new shows that are coming, and sometimes things don't last long. The Bridges of Madison County, First Date, both of those were very well respected on Broadway. Great reviews, positive feedback from audiences and critics alike, but neither of them ran a significantly long time on Broadway. And then there was tours of Buyer and Seller, tours of Bridges of Madison County. None of those tours came to Rochester. So Rochester audiences have not had a chance to see those works books yet. And thanks to CenterStage at the JCC, now they can.
Congratulations. And how long does a typical show run at JCC?
So we run 3 weekends.
Oh.
We run on Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, although some shows like the Calamari Sisters run a little bit longer. We run those on Wednesdays through Sundays. But the audiences can come and see them, during usually a 10 to 15 performance schedule during a 3-week run. And with a 288-seat theater, there's plenty of seats for everybody to come and see it.
That's great. So I saw something called Cheer Camp. Can you tell me what is?
Yes. So again, we were one of the first theaters in Rochester to do the musical Bring It On.
Okay.
Which happens to be written by a gentleman by the name of Lin-Manuel Miranda, who wrote Hamilton.
Yeah, big name.
And Tom Kitt, who wrote Next to Normal. This was a project that was done before Hamilton, and hysterically funny, powerful, funny, with great popular music, and we did that as part of our JCC Summer Stage program.
I see.
Because it is a play that takes place in a high school. So all of the performers are high school and college age, and it's a musical about competitive cheerleading. So we know that not every musical theater performer knows how to do cheerleading. So we offered cheer camps to get the kids to be able to get comfortable with some of the tricks that they would have to do. And we had a cast of over 30 kids performing in that show who were doing singing, dancing, and high-flying stunts in order to be able to tell the story. If it's about competitive cheerleaders, you gotta have great cheerleaders that can do those flips and tricks.
True.
That's all part of making sure that whatever we do, we are giving everybody the best quality production that you can, bringing the best singers in, bringing the best dancers in order to make sure that the audience is seeing a first-class production that is on par with what they would see on Broadway or on a national tour.
That's terrific. And it's neat that there are ways for children to be involved. Are there classes during the year? Or?
Yeah, no, we do have, the Tykes program has programs for young kids where they can come in and use drama as a way to learn and get comfortable on stage. A lot of it is not just about training kids how to be great performers, but about using theater for them to build their confidence, to be able to build relationships, to be able to explore their creativity and their emotions. And a lot of our young programs, young student program, educational programs are part of the Tykes program for that. But when we do theater at the JCC for young people, the summer is about putting on a show. We're teaching them what it's going to be like when they go out into the world and become professional performers and have to go and do their homework.
Yes.
When they do their shows in high school or in college, they have a very long rehearsal period.
Right.
We have a 6-week rehearsal period. They have to learn their music, learn their dance, learn their lines, and give a professional level production on opening night for those audiences that are there paying for good money for their tickets. They can't spend 6 months learning their lines and learning their choreography. They have to go to rehearsal, they have to go home, they have to do their homework, they have to learn the stamina to perform 5 shows in a 4-day period.
Right.
That's an important part of learning to be a professional performer. So it's on-the-ground training as well.
It's enormous discipline and enormous personal growth that happens in that short.
Absolutely.
And the rest of the time, it's a lot about personal development that fits well with the faith community.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the stories that we try to tell are often stories that are going to enlighten not just the audiences with stories that they may not know, but the performers as well. I remember a number of years ago we did the musical Hair, and we did that as part of our Summer Stage program, again, because it's all young people that are in the cast of that. And everybody came into auditions and they were like, wow, man, like this is the hippy-dippy weatherman. I'm like, okay, we're going to stop that right there. We're going to talk about what the counterculture movement was, what the hippie movement was, the anti-war movement. We're going to talk about what these people were experiencing in their lives at that time and why this musical existed. And we watched documentaries and we talked about it, and we brought in people who had lived through that time period to talk about their experience, and the draft and the war and the Vietnam era. And all of a sudden these kids were just transformed in learning about a time period that they knew nothing about. And when we did that performance, there were met people of the era, people who had served in Vietnam, who came to see the show, and they were in tears saying, those kids up there who weren't even born yet when I went to Vietnam are telling my story. And there's nothing more powerful than that. When we did the musical My Mother's Lesbian Jewish Wiccan Wedding, opening night, this grandmother came up to me in tears and said, I came to this show because my granddaughter is a lesbian and she's going to be marrying a woman. And I told her I would not go to her wedding.
Oh my.
And now I get it. And now I can go. And she was in tears. You know, when you can tell those kind of stories that entertain but also open people's eyes to a world around them, that's the greatest gift that we as a theater can give, and an exciting thing for me as an artistic director to be able to bring to the community.
Right, because theater provides that safe space where people can see it in a slight remove, that they can just learn and feel safe, supported by an audience around them.
Absolutely, and that's why being a theater in a JCC, we have a very large Jewish population that comes to the theater, but more than half our audience members are not Jewish, and so our stories are not always exclusively Jewish, but when we tell a story about a Jewish experience, and we have an audience full of both Jews and non-Jews having that shared experience of hearing that story, that is a much more powerful experience for all audience members than preaching to the choir, so to speak, and telling a story that just the people who are in the audience already know.
Right.
And that's part of what we do. So then when we do a show like August Osage County, which is a Tony Award, Pulitzer Prize winning play that we were the first theater in Rochester to be able to present. And audience members wanted to see this play because they'd heard about it in New York. They wanted to see it. We had a huge crowd, sellout audiences. And then we did the play Bad Jews, and we can tell our audience members, well, it's kind of the Jewish August Osage County.
Oh, yes.
And then we can have that experience of all of those different people coming together to have that shared experience, and people can see themselves through other people's eyes. The more specific you get in the type of story you tell, the more universal it is for audiences to be able to find their own experience in that story.
Right, and they might not find themselves together in an audience in any other setting.
That's right.
For any other event.
That's absolutely correct.
So do you come from a theater background yourself, and how did you get to this position?
Yeah, so I've done theater since I was, you know, a little kid. Always loved it. I did my first play when I was in 5th grade. You know, my parents drove me around every night for rehearsals all throughout high school. And then when I got to college, I decided, you know, theater is not really what I want to pursue as a career. I love it, but it's not something that I feel I can make a career at, make money at, et cetera. So I went into business and worked in the corporate world, and never gave up doing theater for fun. As an actor, as a director, I was always involved in theater at the JCC, at other theaters around town, when I was in college. But about 12 years ago, I was getting frustrated in the corporate world, finding that it really wasn't satisfying me anymore. And I got a chance when CenterStage's founder, Herb Katz, retired from the JCC to step in and take over CenterStage Theater. And, you know, who doesn't want to cast aside boring corporate work and do something that they're passionate about and cut their salary in half, right? You know? I mean, who doesn't want to do that, right? So I'm very, very fortunate that I got the opportunity to step into CenterStage and take it in a new direction and really do something exciting with my life. I feel like I'm starting over even though I'm 9 years old. Yeah.
And so you're from Rochester?
No, I'm from Niagara Falls originally. Went to college at SUNY Brockport, and basically moved to Rochester while I was going to college in Brockport because I was out of money and I needed to get a job. And from there I fell in love with the city. I fell in love with the art scene here. I was living in Rochester less than 2 weeks before I auditioned for my first show here. Found a community with the local theater community and have been a part of it ever since, which is why I was been so instrumental when Theater Rocks originally got formed, because I saw that the local theater community had a lot of crossover from shows to show, theater to theaters, but I found that people weren't working together, weren't communicating together, and so all of the different artistic directors of the theaters that were around at that time got together and said, you know, we need to form an organization where everybody is working together, communicating together, and that is a formal organization that says to the community, Rochester Theater support each other.
That's right. And now that is TheaterRocs, is that correct?
Theater Rocks for Rochester.
It's basically a consortium of theater companies.
Consortium of pretty much every local theater company, I believe, is part of it. And when you go to any show, whether it's at Jiva Theater or at the JCC or at some small theater company that is performing at Muck, you will see an insert in there about all the theater companies in Rochester, list of all the upcoming shows, and links to the theaterrocks.org webpage where you can see what everybody has to offer. Theaters in Rochester are not in competition with each other. The more good theater that audiences go to, the more good theater that audiences will go to. People don't sit down at the beginning of the year and say, well, it's January 1st, let me see what my budget for theater is and let me make a list of the things I'm going to go to. They wait to see what excites them. They wait to see what they're hearing about from their friends and neighbors and seeing on social media and reading about in the paper or hearing about on the media or watching on your show and hearing about what's out there and saying, let's go see that. You know, word of mouth is the most powerful tool we have for spreading the word about the theater that we have here. And through Theater Rocks and everybody putting that word out there, everybody gets to hear about what great theater we have in Rochester. We have world-class arts and culture in Rochester, far beyond what cities of our size really have. And audiences take for granted sometimes the great work that we have here, the great opportunities that we have here. And if they get out and go to the theater and see a show, they're going to be hooked, and they're going to want to keep going back and seeing more and more and more.
Especially with the interesting kind of programming you've been offering there.
And that's why we do a varied group of programming. We know that we get somebody in for just one show that they will keep coming back.
That's fantastic. So looking over the horizon, what's your dream project coming up, Ralph, or what are you working on, and how far in advance do you prepare for a season?
So our passion, my personal passion from a theater point of view, is creating new works. So we are working with a number of writers on a couple of projects that are in the development phase that we hope we will be able to present the world premieres of. One of them has moved forward. It is called Survivors, and it is written by Hollywood screenwriter Wendy Kaut, who developed a play we did a few years ago called Naked Encino. We had the world premiere of that. She was the creator of the TV series Anything But Love with Jamie Lee Curtis, and it was written for television for many years. Now she's writing for theater. And we are creating an original play called Survivors that is based on actual Holocaust survivor testimonies from Rochester-based Holocaust survivors.
Unbelievable.
It is a play that's going to use the actual words of those survivors to tell a varied group of stories about a varied group of survivors who all started in different places but all ended up in Rochester. And this is a piece that we're going to present on our stage, as well as take to schools in the Rochester area for Holocaust awareness education, and that we hope then, once we have finished developing that it's going to go out into the world for other communities to do as well. So that's the current new work that I'm developing right now. Just had a bit of a workshop conversation with Jason Odell Williams, who wrote Church and State, on his next new play. There's going to be great new works coming to the JCC stage over the years to come.
Well, we'll certainly be watching, and we'll come back to In the Spotlight as these events break on the horizon.
Would love to do that.
Well, thank you so much for coming in, Ralph. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
My guest today has been Ralph Meranto. He is the artistic director of JCC CenterStage. That's the theater company housed at the Lewis S. Wolk Jewish Community Center here in Rochester, New York. And it's been a wonderful, stimulating conversation. Congratulations.
Anytime.
Lucky to have you.